more or less, almost 3% per dollar. This is when the contractual cost is 0.5% per month. For the markup, it is 0.47%, basically 5, so 0.5 I mean. So for the markup financing, the cost of financing and the contractual markup are almost identical. But for the interest-based system, it's much larger. Almost how many times? 6 times, almost 6 times more. Okay? Now, this is cost for debtors or borrowers. Let's see how much the rate of return for lenders. Okay, if we aggregate the markup divided by surpluses, we get the return. If we divide the aggregated markup by loans, we get the cost of financing. Now, for lenders, it is 2%. Okay, because they're utilizing their assets, their surpluses. Each dollar is lent over and over 4 times. So you multiply actually 4 times 0.454 times. I mean, if you multiply these two, 4.29 times this, you get, no, actually this is, yeah, I think you get the same. But if you multiply this time this, you get this. So the turnover, you multiply the turnover, you get the rate of return. Anyhow, lenders in an interest-based system, they get more. This is true. Okay? In an interest-based system, lenders, they get more than what they get in a markup system. And this explains why would lenders prefer an interest-based system, because they get more. But it's not that much more, by the way. They get 2% in the markup system or regime, but they get 3.2% of return in case of an interest-based system. So this would explain why lenders would prefer the interest-based system, because they are getting more return. Okay, they are getting more return. But other than that, all indicate in terms of efficiency, turnover, cost of financing, wealth distribution, aggregate level of consumption, in terms of all other aspects, Islamic finance beats interest-based finance. It's only for the return for those lenders that will make it preferable for them to choose an interest-based system. So we need lenders to give up some of the return in order to move to a much better regime, which is the Islamic regime. But just to be sure that this 3.2% is on average and on aggregate. Otherwise, the system is cyclical. Okay, the system is always cyclical, and the lenders are not all of them assured that they will get back their money. They might lose because the debtor would just simply go bankrupt. And this crisis, by the way, and you know who paid the cost. The primary victim of the crisis was banks. And the rest of the economy, of course, comes afterward. So the primary victim in this crisis was banks themselves. So those banks are themselves subject to high risk if they follow this kind of financing. Okay, now suppose we have no lending whatsoever. Okay, we have no lending whatsoever. But we have charity. We still have the same relative behavior, relative consumption, but there is no lending. We are allowing only for charity. Okay? Let's see what would happen if we allow charity. Okay? If Z, this letter Z means the percentage of charity as a percentage of wealth, okay? As a percentage of surpluses. If it is 0, this is the standard. In this case, it is our standard model here, i.e., in case there is no lending and no charity whatsoever. Average consumption in the economy, $74 per consumer. Median consumption, 72. The consumption of donors, i.e., those who have surpluses, is 84. Consumption of receivers, those are in deficit, is 63. This is no charity whatsoever. Now suppose there is a charity of 2.5% of wealth. Those who have surplus, they will give 2.5% of their wealth to those agents who have deficit, i.e. they have a consumption gap, a positive consumption gap, i.e. those who have deficit. They want to consume more, but they are unable. Their income does not satisfy their needs. Now, if there is a 2.5% charity, average consumption of the whole economy goes up from 74 to 78. Median consumption goes up also from 72 to 76. Now the most interesting part, even donors, the consumption of donors goes up from 84.8 to 85, very little, but it goes up, it doesn't go down. So even if it is fixed, that would be a very surprising result. How come the consumption of donors, those who are giving, rises? Okay, that's a very interesting result. Let me finish the table and then come back to see why the consumption of donors go up. Consumption of receivers naturally would go up from 63.6 to 71.5. This is natural because they are receivers. They get this donation and therefore they are able to consume. So average consumption of receivers, this is the average by the way, for donors and receivers is the average. Now suppose the charity is 5% of wealth. Again, aggregate consumption would go up to 79. The median consumption would go up to 77. Consumption of donors would go even higher, 85.1. Let me double check. Yeah, goes to 85.1. Consumption of receivers will also go up to 73.3. Now suppose we make it 10%. Now aggregate consumption does not go up. It doesn't mean that, this means that simply taxing people or asking them to pay more doesn't necessarily makes aggregate consumption higher. So if we have a 10% charity out of wealth, even if it's voluntary by the way, aggregate consumption would be slightly lower than the 5%, than the case of 5%. Median consumption again would go down from 77.3 to 77.1. Consumption of donors would go a little bit lower, would become a little bit less from 85.1 to 84.9. I assume this is I think this is statistically insignificant, but in any case, it is a little bit lower. Consumption of receivers, surprisingly, average consumption of receivers would also go down. Now, why is it that aggregate consumption go up and the consumption of donors themselves would go up? The reason is very simple, okay? I'm running out of time, I'm sorry. This is the last part. We will finish right now. Now, because consumption of each agent is determined by two things, your own income and the consumption of your neighbors, this means that if the average consumption of your neighbors is low, then also your consumption will be a little bit lower, right? Even if your income is a little bit high, but if the average consumption of your neighbors is low, this will negatively impact your consumption. Your consumption will be little bit lower. If the consumption of your neighbors is higher, your consumption would be also higher. Remember that consumption is determined by two factors: income and wealth, of course, plus the average consumption of your neighbors. Now, if your neighbors are poor, okay, their average consumption is low. Okay? Now, if you are able to give them some money to donate, their average consumption would go up, and therefore your consumption would go up, because average consumption affects your own. And therefore, if the average consumption of your neighbors go up, your own consumption would also go up. If we put it in terms of psychology, you will not be very happy if you have a very a new mobile, for example, if none of your neighbors have a new mobile. But if some of them at least have a new mobile, then you will be better able to enjoy your own new mobile. So you will be happier to consume if at least some of your neighbors are also able to consume. So this social dimension is reflected with this relative behavior issue. So now that would explain why would the consumption of donors would go up if they donate. If you donate a certain percentage of your wealth, okay, but the average consumption of your neighbors would go up. So you have two competing factors. Your wealth would go down a little bit, 2.5%, but the consumption of your neighbors would go up. So as long as the impact of the consumption of your neighbors is greater than the impact of your own wealth, then your consumption would go up. Okay? So this tells us, in other words, donation is not a zero-sum game. On aggregate, even on the individual level and on the aggregate level, charity, donation, zakah is not a zero-sum game. It's not that someone gives and loses. If he's giving, he's losing, the other party is gaining. Both of you will be happy. So, ما نقص مال من صدقة. So, charity will not reduce your happiness and aggregate consumption. It's very likely that it will improve. Okay, this will conclude the presentation today. I urgently ask each and every one of you to look into this agent-based simulation and complexity issues and try to play with this agent. You don't have to understand all the issues of complexity, complex system, all that stuff. But simply to start with agent-based simulation, play some games with it. This will give you the feeling. This NetLogo website, they have a manual, they have examples, they have everything. You can start from day one playing with it. It's very simple, very straightforward, gives you an idea, and I'm sure you will be able to generate much better ideas than these are simple examples, yani, to give a flavor of how these tools, these new tools, would fit our own needs in terms of research in Islamic economics than the conventional system. Thank you very much, and we have few minutes for question and answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sami Suwailim, for this really very educating lecture in simulation theory related to economics and also your highlights to the international financial crisis. I'm sorry that we have lost connection with Islamabad, but I hope that they might be connected now to ask some questions. But now I give the floor to UK to address some questions to Dr. Sami Suwailim. Please go ahead. Okay.
Yes. Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Sami, thank you very much for your illuminating lecture. Jazakumullah khair. My question is pertaining to your wealth distribution table. You were saying that the interest rate system is low inferior as compared to the markup system. Now, but my concern is the fact that a lot of Muslim countries have major conventional banks operating in them, and these conventional banks are willing to meet the needs, the financial needs of the people. So, in a sense, I would say beggars can be choosers. So, what is it that the Islamic banks can do to offset that imbalances? Thank you very much.
ناخذ الأسئلة حقتهم.
Let's get all the questions from UK, then Dr. Suwailim will answer all of them together, okay? So another question, please.
Okay. No other...
That's all.
That's all.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. Obviously, this model is a simplified model, as it's very clear. Now, for extremely or highly skewed wealth distribution in many Islamic countries, we have to start with production. Islamic banks, they have to give the majority of their financing to productive activities.